Well, hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the SwanBank podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. We have episodes every Monday, which are sermon recaps, and every Friday for one of these lovely catch-ups with me and the very wonderful Kathryn Stevens. Kathryn, how are you?
I am good, thank you, Sam. It is good to be with you.
How's your week going?
Well, it's quite early on, isn't it? So good. So far, so good, I guess.
Nothing's gone wrong quite yet.
Not yet, but there's time.
Good.
There's time.
That's a good insight into generally how we're feeling. The fact that nothing's gone wrong is the sign of a good week.
The bar is very low.
The bar is very low. Excellent.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? What's been going on?
Well, did you know, Sam, that we had a church quiz on Friday night?
I did know. To be fair,
Did you?
I happened to be there. Even we had a lovely time.
We had a very lovely time. You looked particularly smart in your glittery waistcoat and hat.
I left Rachel solely in charge of costumes.
Why did you do that?
Well, it's not really my area of expertise. And on reflection, it's probably not Rachel's area of expertise either.
It's asking for trouble.
Indeed.
If
you haven't had a chance to check it out, then you can still go and watch it over on our
We had such a good
Facebook
laugh.
and YouTube. It was great, actually.
I don't know if people who were tuning in had a laugh, but we had a laugh doing it,
We had
didn't
a wonderful time. Doing things on a Friday night here is always funny because the volunteers you bring in are always on a bit of a high at the end of their week of work. We're a little bit delirious because we don't normally work on a Friday, so it's all a bit strange and bizarre. But we had a great time. You were our resident Richard Osman type.
I was sitting at the desk with my computer,
dancing
trying
away
to say
for most
smart
of it.
things. I was. I was happy to be Richard Osman as long as I didn't have to say intelligent things.
Yeah, as long as you didn't have to know the answer.
No,
that's good.
Absolutely.
Do you want to share any reflections on your contributions to the quiz? You featured quite heavily, in fact.
I did. So I feel like we played a game called Whale or Whale.
We did.
Which is either the whale as in the mammal.
The whale.
Yeah. As opposed to whale as in human sound.
Yeah, indeed.
And I had to do a whale as in human sound, but sound like a whale.
We'll maybe just insert a clip here of Kathryn's whale noise for
Excellent.
you.
Well, I have to say that I thought I did the best out of all of them.
I would say the bar was very low.
It was a bit of a best out of a bad lot, I would say.
But you were committed. You put your dog collar on especially.
I did.
It was great.
I did. Yeah, it was very good. So I was quite... And then I played a kazoo.
You played the kazoo?
As well.
Who knew you had that talent hidden away in your locker?
Especially being able to play a kazoo like the wrong way around, which apparently I did.
I didn't notice.
Realising.
I think it's fine. I should have provided clearer instructions when I provided the kazoo.
Absolutely.
Obviously,
There was an
Lloyd
assumption.
looked like he loved it.
He
looked like he had a great
happy.
time.
He actually came into the office, especially.
There was some choreography.
To do that.
I mean, was that planned or was that just spontaneous?
Well, that was spontaneous.
Wow. Hey.
It was great, wasn't it?
Happy times together. Happy times.
But I have a confession to make.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Because for those who tuned in last week, they'll know that I spoke about kabaddi.
Yeah, and in fact, there was some mocking by the fact that I didn't know what kabaddi was.
Yes.
Which is interesting now.
It is interesting because my confession is I talked about kabaddi. Some of you are thinking, what on earth is she talking about? Kabaddi is a contact team sport played between two teams of 7 players. The objective of the game is for a single player on a fence, referred to as on offence, as opposed to defence on a fence.
This is a bizarre game.
Offence as opposed to defence.
Sorry.
Referred to as a raider, to run into the opposing team's half of a court, tag out as many of their defenders as possible, and return to their own half of the court, all without being tackled by the defenders and in a single breath.
Wow.
I mean, we should play this.
We should play that. Just no ball.
There is no, and that's my confession, because I'm like, you've never heard of kabaddi, and I'm like, well, I think it's with a ball. It doesn't even have a ball at all.
No ball.
It's more like a game of tag, serious game of tag.
Serious tag.
I reckon it's a bit like dodgeball without the ball, but instead you just go and wrestle each other to the ground.
Have you got an Alexa update for us? We've been having weekly updates from you about how your Alexa's going.
Still not going well.
Not good?
No, not at all. I'm just not convinced at all.
Does it understand you or Lloyd yet, or?
I still think it favours Lloyd.
Okay.
You see, I've started calling Alexa an it now because.
Right. Well, that's not going to help, really.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, she does tell you the time. She understands that. Alexa, what time is it? She'll tell me the time.
You do wear a watch, which is funny that you need an Alexa to tell you the time.
Well, when I'm in bed.
Oh, fine.
And it's dark.
Okay.
Do you know if you whisper to Alexa, she'll whisper back?
Really?
Yeah. Alexa, what time is it?
All right.
And she'll whisper it back.
Wonderful.
So yeah. But when I'm asking her to play stuff, it's not great. Funnily enough, when I asked her to play our podcast, that worked quite well.
Hey, good plug. You can now listen to the SwanBank podcast on your Alexa.
Yeah.
It's all there, ready to go. Happy days.
It's great.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's take a moment to just reflect on some of the stuff that's been going on in the news this week.
Yes.
So one of the things that has come out today, actually, just as we're recording, is that it's been a year since we heard of the passing away of Caroline Flack. Mm-hmm. Caroline Flack was a TV presenter, really big personality, presented all sorts of TV shows, was really well known, and particularly amongst maybe the younger end of society. And she committed suicide a year ago, I think today. Mm-hmm. Actually, we're recording this on Tuesday the 16th, so I think it's a year ago today.
It is.
That she committed suicide. And so we just wanted to spend a bit of time, not necessarily reflecting on the details of that story. Incredibly tragic sort of series of events. There was all sorts of media scandal about an incident between her and her partner.
Yeah. Something
that her partner actually had no interest in really pursuing, but there was all sorts of things that meant that it became a very public story. Which all eventually just became too much for her to be able to cope with. Yeah.
And I mean, when you trace back, it seems like such a tragic situation, really, because, when you mention about, the kind of history with her partner, there's suggestions of domestic abuse, that she had abused her partner, physically abused her partner, and while you're right in saying that he didn't want to pursue it, the police had chosen to anyway. And so I mean that in itself is a really important issue, isn't it? Issues of domestic violence is massive in our society. And then obviously the pursuing of this was really instrumental in her getting to a place where she took her own life. I mean, it's just the most tragic situation, which I guess speaks to me about someone's mental and emotional, physical well-being, really. And I think for me, Sam, the thing that really, because we never actually know what's going on.
No.
Behind closed doors, do we? I know it's a bit of a cliche to say that, but it's true. It's true that we only see what people might want us to see. And if I look at my own life, then I know that there are times when in, for example, in the work I do as a minister, that there are times when I know that I'm not feeling great within myself. But we've got a service to do, and so you become professional, and you try and be authentic with that. Of course you do, but actually no one wants me to stand up on a Sunday and just be really miserable. And so you try and balance that.
Yeah, because there is a balance there. Because actually some of those powerful Sundays we've had is when people have been at the front and they've been really vulnerable about where they're at, what they're struggling with, and you can really see that emotion come through, and that is really inspiring and challenging and almost empowering for people who are watching. Yeah, because it almost is a permission-giving thing. Absolutely. That to be a Christian doesn't mean that it's all good all the time. Yeah. But you're right. There is then a balance between you can't bear out your whole soul to everyone every Sunday morning.
No, it's not appropriate to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's been some writing around. There's a book called The Wounded Healer, and that's about allowing our struggles, our brokenness to impact how we live, to then help others to find a place of a greater sense of healing, a greater sense of wholeness. But you can't engage in trying to help others find a greater wholeness if you are utterly broken with undealt with brokenness. So it's actually really important to strike that balance in how we approach life, how we present ourselves, how we engage with people, how we share in conversation with people. And I guess for someone like Caroline Flack, whose job as a presenter was to be upbeat, was to draw people in, was, you know, she didn't have the luxury that we might have when we're putting a service out to be able to say, actually, you know, we're all struggling at the moment. I mean, she's not able to do that in such a way. So it led me to think about how we find our safe places to be fully ourselves, what it means to be ourselves within Christian community as well, how we draw alongside those who might battle with particularly challenging mental health. What it looks like for us to be a caring community, a place of honesty, and so on, and that is just such a relevant issue for us to address, isn't it, as a church?
You use that phrase, being fully yourself. What do you think that looks like? What is that about?
I think it's okay. I'm going to come out with another cliche now. It's okay to not be okay, actually. And it's okay to be okay. You know, so I think to be fully ourselves is allowing us to be in a place where we tune into how we are emotionally.
Okay.
And to acknowledge where we're at, and to not try and pretend that we're something other than we are. I think that's what I mean.
That's really interesting, because that's something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and certainly something that I've struggled with, particularly through lockdown, is working out how you're actually feeling, like what emotions are actually going on. You know, I'm not somebody who particularly can deal with more than one emotion at a time. I'm not particularly emotionally I don't know, intelligent. I don't know, is that the phrase? I don't know. And so it takes me a long time sometimes to work out how am I actually feeling about this, and to notice the signs of maybe you slipping into a more negative frame of mind, because it's easy to pass things off as, oh, it's just life, or it's just lockdown. Whereas there's all sorts of signs that if you are tuned in, like you say, then you can begin to notice when things are negative. But also you start to notice and be grateful for when things are good as well. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think if you can get to that place of being able to be tuned into your emotions, and lots of us struggle with that in all sorts of ways. So you're not on your own that. But I think if we can tune into that, then we can discover positive ways to be able to acknowledge and work with how we are truly feeling. So to acknowledge, actually, I'm feeling pretty rubbish at the minute. While that might feel like a bit of a negative place to get to, actually, it's from there you can think, right, I'm feeling pretty rubbish at the minute. Why am I feeling rubbish? What's going on? What's making me feel like this? And there might be a reason, and we might be able to address that and work with it, or there might not be a reason. It might just be, actually, I'm just feeling down. I'm not sure why. And but I think in the acknowledging of that, can start and think, right, what do I need to build in to try and help my mental health at the moment?
And I guess the next stage of that is then who else do I need to bring in to this? Who do I need to let know that I'm in this place, and who do I need to let know and be vulnerable with and honest with about where I am? It's a massive challenge, and I think it's a big learning
learning point for us all. So if I take you back a few years in my life, when some of you know some of my story, but I lived with my then husband who had significant mental health issues, which showed itself in addiction, and we lived with that for, I don't know, 8 plus years of me knowing about it. It had gone on for a lot longer than that. But when everything came to a head and he left home, I was just obviously in bits.
Yeah.
But my default setting for years and years had been head down, get on with it.
Yeah.
Just get on with it. Just keep everything going. Keep the show on the road. Keep the kids going. Keep work going. Keep church going. Just keep going. And I ended up being rushed into hospital, really, really ill. And not wanting to be too dramatic, I nearly died. And it was because of a stress-related ulcer.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea that I had that ulcer at all. And I realise now I just was not tuned into how I was really feeling. Because for me it was just survive, just get on and survive. And so I didn't allow myself space to actually acknowledge how I was feeling, the effect it was having on me. And sometimes I think if it doesn't come out within your mental health, it can find its way out. And for me it was physical. So my body was like, enough, I've had enough.
Wow.
And that just forced me to stop. And so now I try and be a bit more tuned into how I'm feeling, because otherwise it might show itself in an even more unhealthy way. So
sure.
And I think we all struggle with things in one way or another, don't we? That's life.
Yeah. And one of the issues I think around that is whether it's the media or whether it's something ingrained in our culture and our heritage, is that as exactly as you've articulated, the default setting is just get our head down and carry on. Yeah. I think, certainly something about being a bloke, which is you don't want to ask for help. You don't want to be seen as having to depend or rely on other people, which is then really challenging when you're invited to be into a relationship with a God who asks you to completely rely and depend on him.
Absolutely.
Because you can't do anything by yourself. Like, that's a hard thing to come to terms with.
Yeah. I've had 2 conversations with 2 men in the life of our church recently. One this week, one just yesterday, and one last week. And it's around ministry alongside men. And both our conversations spoke about mental health, and one of the guys is doing some training on suicide prevention, particularly with men, because that's a massive issue, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
And so we've talked about how we can, what men's ministry would look like within the life of our church that actually gets beyond the surface of let's go out and have a pint and watch the rugby, or let's go and eat curry and have a laugh. And as good as all those things are, and as important as all those things are, how do you get beyond that to actually, I'm really struggling at the minute?
Because that's one of the key things to one of the points you raised earlier, which is around what this looks like in the context of a Christian community, a loving and caring and compassionate Christian community. I don't know if you want to speak into that a little. Because we're doing quite a bit of work at the moment and building up what our pastoral life as a church looks like into the future, and that doesn't just mean how we care for people within the life of a church. We believe that we're part of this community here in Burslem, and so what it looks like for us to authentically care for our community and love our community. And so we're looking at building what we've called a network of care that recognises that everything we do in and through the life of the church has a pastoral element to it. And by that I mean that we genuinely draw alongside one another and care for one another in ways that are appropriate to the individual. I love that phrase, network of care. I just think it's
great. It's Jan came up with that phrase, Janet Bagnall, and it's just a lovely phrase because I think it really speaks about what we are about. I think that it's not, we're not like the next emergency service. That's not us, and we're not trained in. Well, most of us aren't trained in professionally. In caring for someone with mental health issues or whatever it might be, but it is our Christian calling to care for people. It's right there, and we see it outplayed in the life of Jesus, and so it's really important that we do that. I mean, that was picked up on Sunday night, really. That it was about healing on the Sabbath. And the conversation that Lauren and Apello and myself had was around the importance, the primary place that caring for people takes in the life of Jesus. And therefore that it should for us as well.
And it's both ways, isn't it? There's times when we will be able to be people who offer care to others. And that's a challenge for everyone. That's something that everyone can do wherever you're at, whatever you're feeling like. There's a sense in which you can offer some sort of care to others. But the flip side is that there will also be points where you need some care from another person, and being a part of a distinctively Christian community is about offering and receiving that care and compassion and being open to that, I think.
And being open to receiving the care is a major challenge for some people. Some people would much rather give and give and give, but for them to receive can be really difficult for a whole number of reasons. One, it can be that, some people don't feel like they deserve to receive care. Some people feel that it's a sign of weakness to acknowledge that we need some care. There are all sorts of reasons for it, but actually, if we want to build up a proper network of care, then you're absolutely right, Sam. It's got to work both ways.
I think one of the things at the moment is around people saying something along the lines of, well, there's somebody who's worse off than me, so offer it to them. Help them out. Whereas, and I think I've probably been guilty of saying that at some point during this whole season. Well, yes, there probably is somebody who is in a worse position than you are, but that doesn't mean that you're not in a place where you need to just receive some help or some care.
And so this network of care that we're talking about at the moment in the church, and that we're kind of unrolling, is it's about trying our best to create a culture of recognizing that we're not to be dependent on one another. We're there for one another. We care for each other, but we're not to create dependency.
Interesting.
So actually, we will be quite robust at saying to people, if actually we are not equipped to be able to to help you through this, but we know someone who is. And so to be able to signpost people to the proper places to receive the care and the help they need, while we would always want to stand alongside people and recognise that there are areas where we can input. And
that's not about saying we don't want to help.
No.
That's about us offering the best help
Absolutely.
a person can receive, isn't it?
Because we've got to be really careful, haven't we? We've got to be really wise in and not step into areas that actually we're not equipped to manage. But there will be someone who is. And it's finding those places and those people, and how we stand alongside one another as people are receiving care and help is part of that network.
And that's really important. Just that sense of standing alongside one another, recognising that we are in this together, even though we've not been able to be together for a very long time. We still want to be a family here and want to be a distinctively Christian community here, and really dig into what that looks like in terms of us serving the community of Burzum, but also serving one another.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to say we are far, far from being the finished article. Do you know, I think we're just scratching the surface of this, and there are times when we don't get this right. There are times when, sadly, we fall short, and but I think if we can acknowledge that apologise when we need to,
Yeah.
and say, we'll try and learn from this, and we'll try and do better next time, and that kind of thing. I think it's really important that we approach this from a place of honesty and openness, and a willingness and a desire to learn, so that we can do the best that we're able.
For sure. You love a psalm.
I do love a psalm.
You love a psalm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to? Is there anything from the psalms that you've that stood out to you as you've been reflecting on this?
Do you know there is psalm? It's not very zippy. It's not very upbeat. If I'm honest.
Honestly, I've never ever met somebody who uses the word zippy,
It's not
as
very
much
zippy.
as Kathryn. Here we go. What's the opposite to zippy?
Oh goodness.
Unzippy?
Unzippy.
You ready for an unzippy psalm?
Downbeat.
Here we go. Downbeat. Okay.
It is definitely downbeat. But I love the psalm, Sam, because it speaks into life, and it brings the whole emotions of life.
Yeah.
So if I want to find something that's deeply rooted in the human experience, then I will always turn to the psalms.
Oh, and there's a reason why people keep coming back to it in this season of life, and there is.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just a couple of verses from Psalm 6. So the psalmist is in a bad place. I am weary with my mourning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with my weeping. My eyes waste away because of grief. They grow weak because of all my foes. So this is the psalmist who is in a bad place at the moment, who feels that they're being pressed in on every side. Yeah. Nothing is good.
Nothing zippy.
Nothing zippy going on in this in their life at the moment. This is a psalm that's attributed to David, actually. Okay. So David's in a bad place at the moment. But David always tries to find something hopeful. Yeah. In there, and so the little hopeful bit that we find in the psalm just comes a couple of verses later. The Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my cries. So there is that sense in which wherever we find ourselves today, and let's be honest, people are struggling at the moment, aren't they? Lots of people are not in a good place at the moment. In fact, I was just chatting to someone this morning who said that, as they drive around, they're often driving and tears are like rolling down their cheeks, because that's their moment to just be very honest with how they're feeling at present. But amidst those real struggles, as people of faith, we believe that God hears our weeping, that God sees those moments, and sometimes that's what we hold on to. That sense, in that actually, for some people tuning in today, life will be really, really hard, really hard. But God knows. Yeah. God's there. Yeah. God's with you. And that's the psalmists often end up in that place. As hard as life is, I know that God hears, and I know that God's present, and that's faith, isn't it? And that's what we sometimes, that's all we can cling on to, even if we're just clinging on by our fingertips. Yeah,
and I think one of the things for me that has stuck with me more so than it has in previous years out of our Christmas period is just that Jesus Emmanuel concept of God with us, God being alongside us. And actually, when you look through the stories of Jesus being alongside people at all the whole spectrum of emotions and experience and circumstances, and him, there's no judgment from him about where you're at. There's just care and love. Not even just about our spiritual well-being, but the physical, the emotional, the mental well-being as well. And that is something that I've had to cling on to at various times in my life, but none more so than over the last few months, I think.
Absolutely. And the fact that that when you think about Emmanuel, God with us, that's a word we often associate with Christmas, isn't it? But actually it really, in a sense, it really warms my heart. It gives me hope that actually it was into the mess. The mess of the world at the time, and it was in a mess when that Jesus was born. So he didn't come into a pristine and well-ordered world. Came into mess, and so he's acquainted with mess. God knows mess, and that's good, because
there's no mess that he's not big enough to deal with.
No, absolutely.
That he's not seen before.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And and there are times when we just know that God sits in the mess with us, and so he's in it. He's there. He's present.
Great. I think that is our time up for today. Kathryn, thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening. I hope that there's been something encouraging or challenging or inspiring you've been able to take from listening to us today. If you want to get involved in our network of care, then check out our most recent newsletter, which you can find over on Facebook or on our website. And there's details there about how you can get involved in that. There's a little questionnaire you can fill in. And if you are somebody who is in a place where you need some help, you need somebody to talk to, then please do get in touch and we will point you in the right direction for somebody to talk to. But that's all for this week. Kathryn, thank you for chatting.
Thank you. It's been good to be with you again.
We'll be back next week. See you soon.